Now, welcome. All things Yago Roy. Here we are on week 3 of activating the third eye chakra beginner's course. So, where do we start? I like to do a summary of the last 2 sessions just to keep everybody up to speed. There's a lot being said, yeah. And you'll notice that while I'm saying a lot, I'm giving a lot of very simple practices. So the practice at the end is actually very, very simple. And it's just a beginning point of how to access the third eye and begin to ground ourselves into it and just settle into the experience itself. A lot of what I'm saying is telling the story of it. It has its story. And it's important to know the story for a couple of reasons. One is it gives you the overview. It gives you the reason for why we're doing what we're doing. Part of the overview is the arc. There's an arc story in it. There's a beginning point, and then it plays out in life with everybody, and then everybody is somewhere on the arc of the story. And what I mean by that is that if you remember, we're all born with consciousness, but we're not self-aware. So at some point intellect comes in, and intellect gives us choices, and choices can take us away from our innate sense of ourselves. So we can feel the separation of that, the disconnection, the hurt of that separation. And then those choices, we build a personality around the choices we make. And at some point the personality will feel something's lost. Normally when the separation, the hurt becomes too much, the suffering becomes too much, it forces us to go searching. Some people will have a real yearning to go searching or to want to see. It doesn't necessarily based on the arc of the story and how much they're suffering, is they just have this calling for it. But there's different ways we can find our way on the path of the searcher, and then the searcher is looking for something. So the intellect, the searcher within the intellect, is looking for the instinctual sense of self, is that sense of rightness within us. So when the intellect aligns itself with instinct, is intuition is awoken. We now know that we know. And there's the awakening within ourselves, and is the awakening of one's self-consciousness. So that's part of the arc of the story. But along the way, there's many trials and tribulations to figure out, and it's the seeing of the story, it's the seeing the truth of the story is really what brings the third eye to life. It's not just, I just want to switch the light on and there it is, well, sure, what does that mean? What does that mean? It has its story, it has a journey. The more a person knows their story and their journey, the greater the value, the greater the meaning, the greater the purpose within it. So what part of the story are we going to tease out today? I want to tease out understanding the truth of fear and how hurt is part of the truth story. It's part of our connection. So what do I mean by that? I also remember that I'm still talking through the chakras from the last session. I hurried through the heart and the throat and the third eye and the crown. I'll explore them a little more today. I'll get this story out first, and then we'll see how much more we tease out up through the chakras, yeah. And then we'll do a practice today, and the practice at the end is what we will do is we'll start to bring in what's it like to hold the state, the consciousness of the third eye, holding that space as a sanctuary. That it's a place where you go to within yourself, where it's a place where you feel secure, like the root. a place where you feel alive in it and it feels right, a place where there's a vitality in it, where the warmth in it is the warmth of your heart. The wisdom that comes from it comes from a real knowing, and that the ease with which you can look, the seer can see, the knower can know from this place of sanctuary, is that it allows us to be unfiltered in that sanctuary. We give ourselves full permission to look. And there's a way that you set up that sanctuary. So I want to bring that in as part of the practice at the end of today's session. But to do that is part of the sanctuary is understanding the true nature of fear and how our hurt is actually part of our connection and our truth story rather than something separate. So let me recap. We're born with instinct. The child is just instinctually present. They haven't the faintest idea they're present, but they're just instinctually very much in the moment. And you can see it in them. They look right at you. They're completely in the moment. And they're just absorbing it in. They're very receptive. They're in that receptive state. Their life force is totally open to life around them. Then, as we develop and we gain an intellect, the intellect starts to develop. The terrible twos is where me kicks in. Anything me thinks is a great idea, so me becomes all powerful, and that's why the tantrums kick in. Is that the child isn't able to articulate itself, so it gets frustrated. But then, as we gain a bit more intellect, is you'll see the child at a certain point, 5 or 6, is they start to do deals. They get much more clever in their exchanges, because the intellect is kicked in and they realize now they have choices, and they can play those choices. And it's the barter of life, it's the exchange of life. They're just engaging with the natural state of exchange around. Life itself is the fear. Where does fear play into this? I'm in my innocence. I'm just a young child in my innocence. I'm not afraid. I don't know to be afraid. If a loud bang happens, you get that natural reaction response from me. But I don't know yet I have to be afraid of something. So then I always use this as a very simple story to tell. Is I walk into a room and I get a bang on my head. Could be anything. I feel some form of hurt. I use a bang on the head because it's just very basic, very simple. But it could be anything. I'll cry and I'll forget about it. I'll roll on. I'll be in the 3 basic states as a young child. I'll either be laughing, I'll either be crying, or I'll be calm. And I'll flicker between them at any given moment, depending on what's happening. I go back into the room again, I get another bang on the head, I'll cry again, and 2 minutes later, I'm laughing, forgot about it, on I go. And then if that happens enough time, is one time before I go into the room, I anticipate the bang of the head. I'm going into this room and I brace a little bit because I'm now going in expecting to get a bang in the head. A couple of things have happened there. I'm now learning fear is fight or flight. I'm going in protecting myself. There's a difficulty to go into the room because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Does that make sense? And I'm protecting myself in the brace. So I'm now learning fear. At the same time, when I go into the room expecting the bang on the head, I've now put expectation in the room. I'm expecting something. I'm going around looking for it. And at the same time, I've taken my innocence out of the room. I don't go into that room anymore with my innocent state open and receptive. So I withdraw a little bit of my innocence from that room and I put expectation in it instead. And the expectation is I'm going to get a bang in the head. So even before I get a bang on the head, I'm now in a state of suffering. That sense of expectation that can create an anxiety or a stress. And that's me now in a state of suffering. I'm not hurt because I haven't got the bang on the head, but I'm now in that state of suffering. So then I get a bang on the head, it reinforces my expectation and my suffering. So now every time before I go into the room is a little bit more of me. My innocence pulls out of the room and a bit more expectation goes in the room. So now when I go into the room, I go in not in my natural state. I go in a protective state, and I start to put a buffer around me in that room. I start to try to protect myself. So there's behaviors I'll do to protect myself. I might stay away from the thing that's banging me on the head. I might not answer the thing that's banging me on the head. I might not communicate with that thing. I'll try and avoid that thing. And now I'm learning the skill of avoidance is to just avoid. Just as an example, I'm just telling a story. But it's me learning fear, and it's me learning suffering, and I lose a bit of my innate sense of myself, and I'm now replacing it from the hurt and the suffering. I'm now replacing it with a part of me that now is in a state of suffering and hurt, and I put a buffer around myself to protect myself. And as I develop in that with an intellect, becomes my ego, becomes my personality. It's not my natural self. It's not my innate self. Is my fearful self. Is myself that's in the hurt story. I'm now caught up in the hurt story rather than the connection, the truth story of myself. And my perception of that room is now perceived from a place of suffering and hurt, rather than a place of openness and connection and authenticity, that I can be natural in that room. Now, the room is a metaphor for any room, any person in any room, any life situation. It's a metaphor for all of life's stories. There's not one story that I leave out in that. There's not one story that I'm picking on, because it's the same play in all the stories. You might go into another room, and that room encourages the naturalness, encourages the spontaneity, encourages to be oneself in a fearless way without being afraid. And then we can bloom in that room, or with those people in this situation, we find ourselves blooming in it. And that's the play of life. Is some rooms or some times in our life is there's that suffering and struggle, and then there's other times and places and times in our life where there's like that openness, and it creates an imbalance within us. Is we move from fight or flight, and then sometimes we're in the natural connection within ourselves. So, how does this play out in the chakras? I think I said this in one of the other sessions. Is that there's always one or two chakras that we stay more naturally connected to, and we stay in the authenticity of it. Where there's other ones where we're in the struggle, the suffering and the struggle of it. And I'll give you an example. You may know somebody who just totally lives from the heart. They're just totally authentic and from that place, and that they've stayed really well connected and attuned to it. Where you might know another person who is brokenhearted. You can see that within them, there's a brokenness in them, and it's the brokenness of their heart. They're in the hurt and the suffering of that. You may know another person who, I love this one about the solar plexus, the vitality, the personal power. Somebody just has an awful lot of personal power, or they just seem to be able to go and go and go. And when most people would get tired, is this person's up the next morning and they're good to go, and it's just like they're a beast, so to speak. They've just got so much energy within them, so much vitality, that they've stayed really connected to their solar plexus and their power. Where you may know another person who is struggling in their power all the time. They're fighting the lack in themselves all the time, and they're in the struggle of that chakra. So if if you attune to the frequencies of the chakras and you just observe the pattern of them, are you in the center and the more of the being and the naturalness of it, or are you off center and in the push and pull and the struggle of it? And it's a very good way just to get a good measure of oneself. And then to do it with the third eye is to do it from a place of real perception, of real clarity. And that you do it with your knower. There's a knowing in it. You're looking at yourself consciously. You're awake and you're looking at yourself and you're having a good look at where you are. Not where you're meant to be, where you should be, where you might be. Is just know where you are. Where are you within yourself? Here's your center. We talked about it before, that spontaneous physical center. Here's your breath. Here's your energetic center. Here's your mental center. You're in awareness itself. And as you find that center, is now you measure the rest of yourself off that center. So as you go through the different chakras, is you're measuring where you are in them. And you get a good sense of your alignment. So there's the physical alignment in the body, there's the energetic alignment in the energies and the emotions of the body. There's the alignment of your thoughts and your states of mind, but then equally is the truer the frequencies of truth within you. How are you attuned to the innateness of life, the natural states of life itself, of reality? How are you attuned to those frequencies, or are you a little bit off? Does that make sense? So this is why I'm saying this, is you can see how fear, that fight or flight, is that has an enormous effect on how we view life, how we view ourselves. And it's really important to have real clarity about what fear truly is, rather than what we think it is. And a lot of the times we become afraid of the things we're afraid of, and we become afraid of fear, where fear isn't trying to frighten us. It's trying to communicate to us. So if we can understand what it's really communicating, maybe your perception of fear would work far better for us than against us. And the truth is, it will. It will. So I'm going to explain that. And you can understand why I'm telling this part of the story and the importance of seeing the truth of it, because it will play out across the board. Your body, your emotions, your mind, your thoughts, the rooms in your life, the people in your life, the situations in your life, fear is engaged with all of them. And your relationship to fear will dictate your relationship to a lot of those situations. So now you understanding the truth of fear can change many, many perceptions in your life at once. It's an accelerated way of growth and personal understanding of oneself. Okay? And then the other part is that experience of hurt is, and I said before, pain is the experience of separation. You break a skin, you break a bone, you cut yourself while you're shaving. There's not too much blood there now. I cut myself when I was shaving, broke the skin, didn't hurt, stung a little though, is the emotional hurt of separation. I don't love you anymore. I never loved you. Oh, the sting of that. Okay, but you get the idea. The hurt of the intellectual is somebody you respect is called you stupid, and you feel that separation. Okay, so basically, pain is the experience of separation, and it hurts. So, and hurt is an intrinsic part of our life's experience, and it's essential. It really is needed as part of life experiences. Is we can view it as the bad guy. We can view it as the enemy. We can view it as negative and something to be avoided, and preferably yes, avoid it as much as possible. However, it does have its place. And it works a particular way for a particular reason. And if we understood that, and we didn't take it so personal, and we didn't take the hurt we didn't fight with it so much within us, is the hurt is telling us a really important story. And if we can get past that initial, hurt of it and get into the story of what it's really telling us, is we'd realize that the fear and pain are just markers along the road. They're part of our guiding system of life. And that if we use them as a guide and a teacher, is we would view them very differently than if we view them as the bogeyman and the punisher and the destroyer. They're two different ways to perceive it. So here's my fear story to clarify fear's true intention. So I like the hanging off a cliff stories. I like the your life is on the line situation because it really does bring clarity to the situation. So you're standing on the edge of a cliff, right at the edge, and you have your best friend and you have your worst enemy with you. They're both standing there. You're on the edge of the cliff. What will your best friend say, and what will your worst enemy say? Okay. And again, we're keeping the story uncomplicated. Your best friend would say, step away from the edge. Your worst enemy, depending on how much they didn't like it, would say, jump. They tell you to go for it, as an example. Okay, so now the question is what would your fear say? Would your fear tell you to step away, or would your fear tell you to jump? And obviously your fear would tell you to step away. Of course it would. And the reason being is because it's looking out for you. It doesn't want you to hurt yourself. So it tells you to step away. So essentially fear is your best friend. Fear is your protector. Fear is your inner voice. And if I said it to you this way, is how critical can we be internally in our own inner voice? Is that inner critic can be brutal. And we'd say things to personally to ourselves that we'd never say to anybody else because it'd be socially inappropriate. You just would never think of saying it, but yet to ourselves, we'd say the harshest things. And why is that? What's going on there? And let me tell you this story. Fear is part of protecting us. So it's fight or flight. So do you run away to protect yourself, or do you stand and fight? That's the two basic solutions to it: is run away or stand and fight. Again, normally it's to save your life or protect you to avoid hurt. That's all obvious, yeah. But what happens when you ignore your fear? And again, this is like your inner voice. So you ignore your inner voice. Your inner voice tells you something, and you ignore it. Will it go away? Will it go, okay, you're not going to listen. It's okay. Doesn't matter. It's fine. Of course it won't. Because fear's job is to protect you. So it's not going to go away. It will repeat itself. And the more we don't listen, the more it will repeat itself. And then it will repeat itself as many ways as possible. Now, if we're in a place of hurt, it's very difficult to listen when we're in a place of hurt. If we're then struggling in the suffering of that, it's very difficult to listen. It's very difficult to get a clear mind. It's very difficult to trust our own voice. So when we get into that stressful state, it's really difficult to hear what's being really said. And it's easy to hear something and hear it the wrong way. So if your fear gets a little bit anxious, it will speak from that anxious place. If it gets even more stressed, it'll say it more in a more stressful way. At some point, your fear may start shouting at you, if that makes sense. It'll give you a really hard knot in your stomach. It'll give you a sense of impeding danger or impending danger. And that impending danger, rather than taking it as a message from our fear, we take it that that's our fear itself. And that rather than seeing our fear as somebody who's protecting us, is the story gets distorted where we can turn our fear into our enemy. And now we think that our enemy is trying to attack us, we're trying to trick us. And the brutality of our own inner voice is part of fear talking to us and trying to get through to us. And then it just gets to a point where our inner voice just gets so exasperated that it just says things as harshly as possible, because our inner voice is just trying to break through. It's trying to get us to listen. And it's at a point where it's saying things so harshly that we just perceive it as, this is brutal. Does that make sense? And we're our harshest critic. So what would happen if you started to listen to everything your inner voice had to say? Not all at once. Not all at once. And possibly if you haven't been listening to it or haven't been listening to it about certain things, is when you do stop and you listen to it, is it maybe a little brutal at the start? It may be still in the effing and the being and the pointing the finger and giving you the harshest truths, the harshest way, name calling, whatever it is, just to, creating brutal scenarios where you're in your greatest suffering in them and it's trying to get your attention. So it can be pretty intense to stop and listen to one's own inner voice if we're not used to it. So how do you create a space in yourself to do that? That's what we're going to look at in today's practice. And as part of accessing the knower in yourself, because your inner voice is part of your knower, your fear is part of your knower, because your fear is part of your measure of the world around you. It's part of the boundaries, the measuring of boundaries around you, and it's part of measuring the danger within those boundaries. And it's not the danger to make you afraid, it's to let you know where your security is and then the edge of where it's not. In yoga postures, it'd be you following the edge of your practice, your stability, your mobility, your flexibility, and you're holding all three, keeping the space open to the limit of that, which is your edge. And beyond your edge, you start to collapse. That's dangerous. Might not hurt you today or tomorrow, but long term, you're going to collapse into your joints. You're going to start wearing your joints away. You're going to start putting stress and strain on your muscles. You're going to compress. You're going to overstretch. So going over that edge is now you're stepping into ground that isn't solid. That makes sense? So now your fear is telling you, it's a measure of your spatial awareness and where the safety is and where the edge is, where it's unknown after that, and then there can't be a clarity of their safety there. That's what your fear is constantly communicating to you all the time, at a physical level, at an energetic, emotional level, at a mental level. It's just part of our instinctual sense of self, and we want to awaken that with our intellect and coming to a place of intuition with it, the knowing of that sense, the knowing of that communication, and the listening to the true communication and the true nature of our fear and understanding it, so that it doesn't become your enemy or it doesn't stay your enemy, and that your inner voice is able to speak truth to you and speak truth to you in a way that it becomes easier to hear, easier to see, easier to feel, and that inner communication with yourself comes from a place of care and that you can recognize that. Does that make sense? And it allows you to see your strengths and your weaknesses, and it allows you to bring those strengths and weaknesses together to create empowerment, as an example. Okay? So it's being able to recognize fear, and then being able to hold the space to listen to your inner voice and begin to engage with what your inner voice is saying, what it's showing you, what it wants you to feel, what it wants you to hear and think, and that you're able to receive that in a way that you're doing it calmly, and you're beginning to hear the real communication that's going on, and the real sense of the boundaries and the rightness within you. And then if something's past that, well, intuitively, well, maybe that's not the direction you go in, because you can sense the ground doesn't go there for very long. So maybe I don't want to go that far. Does that make sense? So we'll tease that out. But ultimately, fear is your best friend. Fear is you. And it's part of the knower within you. And it's not the enemy. So we're going to tease that out. And you heard I talked about the ground there. Is next week's conversation, I'm going to layer in the 5 elements. So the earth, the water, the fire, the air, the ether. How do you layer the 5 elements into your third eye? That as you perceive your environment around you, what you're perceiving is the elements. And the elements can work for you or against you. Like, can you go with the flow of a situation? Or are you going to go against the flow of the situation? You know, if the energy is expanding into the room, can you step in and go with it? Or is it too much for you? And again, that's the fire. Does that make sense? Is different elements is what would happen if you began to observe the nature of the elements in the room or people in the situation, rather than getting caught up in what people say, you know, or what they're doing, is you observe the earth element. What do I mean by that? Is you put 20 people in a room and you really have a real clarity about grounding, and you're really present and grounded in the room. If you look at those 20 people in the room, you just look at the ground and all of them and their relationship to it, what will you see? You'll see how grounded everybody is or how grounded they are not. And some people might be collapsing, other people might be ungrounded, other people are very grounded. So what's the best way to work with all those people in the room? Bring them all together into the one ground. And that's where that group is most powerful as a group. Just as an example. So we'll bring in the elements next week and we'll start to tease them out, and I'll show you a practice to tease that out as well. But today we're on fear. And then I want you to understand that fear is your best friend. It's not your enemy. And we got to work out a way of communicating with our fear where we begin to hear the real communication and then the power that can come from that within you. Then the other thing is understanding how hurt is part of your connection, is part of your truth. It's an elemental part of the journey. And if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be alive. But let me say it to you this way. Think about something that happened to you in your life. Pleasant or unpleasant, doesn't really matter. Pick one of each. Not the biggest thing, something simple. And you learned a lesson in it. You learned a lesson. And let's say you learned the lesson of patience. This is the thing that allowed you to learn patience. But it was because of your impatience, you made the wrong choices, you did the wrong actions, and then you hurt yourself, or you broke something, or you missed an opportunity because you were too impatient. I'm telling a simple story. But it was the hurt of the actions of your impatience allowed you to learn the value of patience. Okay? Now I'm gonna play it a little bit more. I'm staying the same theme. Is impatience isn't wrong. Is sometimes it's important to be impatient. Because sometimes, is things need to be done at a time when they need to be done. because that's the right time to get it done. If things are lagging behind, is maybe you need to become a little bit impatient to motivate you to act. So sometimes it's very right to be impatient to get things done. And think about how that lesson can be learned. Sometimes you're getting impatient because you knew something needed to be done, and you ignored your impatience because you wanted to be socially polite or whatever it was, you just wanted to be polite, and you didn't say it, and then the letter didn't go out on time, and you lost the job, or you missed your time in college, or you didn't get this, or your shoes were too big and you tripped over and you broke your leg, and you knew whatever, the shoes are too big, and there's an impatience to say it, but you never said it, and there you go, you're in a cast. I'm giving, it's coming off the top of my head, it's just stuff. But my point is that there's a time when impatience is correct, and you learn when to use it at the right time, but you also learn when not to use it at the wrong time. And they can come through different stories where there's hurt involved in it. It's the sting of the hurt helps us focus to learn the lesson. And that part of it is life hurts. And that when we learn the lessons from it, is those lessons is what we step into. We step into the truth of it, and we step into the living wisdom of it. We don't have to learn everything through hurt, but at a certain point, there's no avoiding it. Does that make sense? So when we're in that state of we're conscious but we're not awakened, is normally we have to lose ourselves a little bit to find ourselves. So if we're in our innate sense of ourselves, but we have no clue, there's no sense of awareness in it. We're just instinctually there. Is if the boat isn't rocked, if things don't push and pull us a little bit, and we lose that natural sense of self, we lose that sense of security, we go into fear, we go into the hurt, we have to survive a little bit rather than live, is that all that suffering and hurt motivates us, so that at some point it motivates us. We go, I have to figure this out. What's the thing that's really going to make the difference to all this? Is, well, I really need to see what's going on. I need to wake up, and you'll hear, I'll actually say it this way. At what point in your life did somebody say that to you? Wake up. You need to wake up. I think we've all had somebody say that to us in our life at some point, or multiple times in our life. You need to wake up. And again, that's the message. Is that, you need to actually really see what's going on here and stop getting caught up in your own interpretation or illusion of it. Okay? And I don't mean that judgmentally, because this is everybody's journey. There's not one person in the world who doesn't struggle and go through this. But this is the point that I'm really trying to make, is, and it goes all the way through to our deepest hurts and pains and suffering. And what I'm going to say next, it's hardest to hear it when it's our deepest hurts and our deepest sufferings. But it is true all the same. If you can think of the times in your life where you were most hurt or most in suffering, is all of us, it can be very easy to point a finger and say, well, it was because of that person or that situation or life did it, and we can blame. And in that is, we're not taking responsibility for ourselves in it. Now that might seem harsh. It's not, and let me explain. Is, if somebody bangs me over the head, they are responsible for banging me over the head, and there should be consequences for that. There should be. They are responsible for that, and again, if they've caused hurt, is again that there is responsibility on their part. So it doesn't let somebody who causes us harm off the hook. Equally, it doesn't let us off the hook. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Is there is a responsibility in that. So now the other part is, if somebody bangs me over the head, and this can be difficult to hear sometimes, but it is the truth. If somebody bangs me over the head, they are responsible for banging me over the head. But you see, the moment that pain is felt in me, I'm responsible for that. I am responsible for that pain. And when I take responsibility for that pain, is that allows me to stay with the pain, and it allows me to work through the pain. Where if I become afraid of the pain, is then I try to escape the pain, and then what happens is that I get scarred by the hurt and the pain and the suffering, and I begin to view the world through that pain and through that suffering. Does that make sense? And now I'm viewing the world through suffering and pain and separation. I am responsible for that. And I alone are responsible for that. There's nobody else responsible for that. And again, I'm not saying that like it's an easy thing. I'm not. No doubt on another situation, you'd probably hear me blaming somebody, And so I'm not preaching at perfection here at all. But I do know it's the truth. Is the moment that pain is felt in me, is ultimately I am responsible for that. And if I avoid it, is I'll carry that around with me until I deal with it, until I take responsibility for it and learn what I need to learn and see what I need to see. So I can get the learning and then grow in the wisdom of that learning. And that's just the simple truth of it. So a nice way, well, maybe it's not a nice way, but a way to say it is, at what point do you stop shooting the messenger? At what point do you stop shooting the messenger? And this is what I mean by this, is back to the thing about patience and frustration or impatience, is, were you always going to learn the lesson of patience and impatience? Was that something life was going to deliver to you, that lesson? And the simple answer is yes. You're always going to get that lesson. Life is always going to deliver that lesson to you. Because if you're going around impatient, there's a price to pay. You're going to learn the lesson. If you're going around being too patient, you learn the lesson. If you're patient at the right time, impatient at the right time, well, you learn that lesson too. But life will deliver that lesson for you. Life will deliver that experience. And all the different states and qualities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of them, life is going to deliver you all those experiences. All of them. So now, if it didn't happen the way that it happened, would it have happened another way? If you didn't learn your how to be impatient and patient the right way by being the wrong way in them, if you didn't learn it the way that you learned it, so if it didn't happen in that room with those people, in those circumstances, that situation in your life, would it have happened in another room with different people and another situation of life? And the answer is yes. You're always going to get that lesson. Always. And if it didn't happen this way, well, it could happen that way. Or it could happen that way. Or this way. Or it could come from that way. Or, oh my God, the ground's gone from underneath me, it's coming this way. There's 101 ways that lesson can be learned, but you learned it this way. But it could have been so many other. But you were always going to learn that lesson. Always. So now you learned it this way. So if you shoot the messenger, and now the real messenger in all this is the universe. Life itself, the universe. It's just using life and the combination of life to send you the message. So the room, the people, and the situation was part of the destiny of how you're going to learn this lesson. And part of the lesson is learning to understand fear and how to work it for you rather than against you, how to understand hurt when it happens, and what's the real value in hurt, which is, again, the lesson of connection. What's the thing you need to learn that you will grow in this rather than be separated by it? So you're either learning the hurt story or the truth story, and that your relationship to fear is intrinsically linked in that. Your understanding of hurt and pain is intrinsically linked in that. And then not shooting the messenger is not pointing the finger at a particular room, at a particular person or people, at a particular situation, and go, it's all your fault. You can say it is their responsibility, and you can be very clear about what people are responsible for, and that you could hold them to that. There's nobody gets off the hook. But within that is you also have your responsibility for the hurt that you felt in it. And your responsibility is, what is it that you need to learn in that rather than taking you further away from yourself, brings you more into yourself with one extra thing, with awareness. It helps you awaken to some part of yourself a little bit more. I gave an example the other day. It was an old one, but it did the trick. I remember my first day in primary school, and I think it was a few days. I think everybody else was there 2 or 3 days, and I came in on the third day, and I came in a little late, and I was very emotional. It was a little bit away from my house, and I just didn't like new things. It was just I was upset. So I was sitting down the back, and I was crying to myself, a little cry to myself. I was 11 or 12, and the teacher called me out and made a spectacle of me, and told me to stop crying and stop being a baby and all that, And it was my first day. It was a room, it was like 30 kids, 40 kids. My first day to school, I was crying because I was afraid. I felt very vulnerable. And this man pulled me out and decided to make a spectacle of me and put shame in me, is shame me in my actions. And it also turned out to be a very nice man as well, because everybody's multidimensional in their way. So it wasn't all bad, but that one wasn't a good call, So, but what happened is that I took my innocence. I realized that this is a place that I can't be innocent in. I'm going to have to protect myself here now, and also is that my vulnerableness was made wrong. So what my hurt in that is that made me withdraw my a little bit of my innocence and also my vulnerableness. And it told me that my vulnerableness was wrong. Does that make sense? And again, me going around hiding that is I was genuinely innocent, and I was genuinely vulnerable, and I was genuinely upset. I was very natural in me. Is part of my story is reclaiming part of my vulnerableness, is recognizing the truth of that story. And part of that truth for me is realizing that I gave away a bit of my innocence and my vulnerableness there. I took it out of that place. I'm going to bring it back into myself. And it was part of me as a grown adult learning how to be vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable. Is that story came up again after like 30 odd years. I'm remembering the story, and I'm going, why am I remembering the story? What's going on? And it was me going through the process of letting go of that suffering and hurt, because it impacted. It was a big thing. For a 12-year-old, having that, it was a big thing at the time. It had never happened. I was only in preschool, so going to the big school, and then the first day, basically getting your pants pulled down and smacked by the teacher in front of everybody. Well, it was memorable, So So my point is that it allowed me to recognize part of my vulnerable story, and to allow my vulnerableness and my natural vulnerableness to be okay, to be safe and secure in it. That showing that isn't a sign of weakness; it's actually a sign of strength. That it allows me to stay sensitive and engaged rather than closing off and putting out some harder front, as an example. So I'm just trying to give an example of recognizing the fear and understanding what its real message is understanding the hurt and the suffering, and how it's a lesson to be learned all the time. And that if it didn't happen that way, it was going to happen another way. So if it hadn't happened that way for me, it would have happened another way. So when I learned to stop shooting the messenger, it allowed me to also see more of the humanity of other people. And as I said about this teacher, he's actually a nice guy. Well, sometimes he was a bit brutal at times, but overall, he's like everybody else. It's a combination of a mixture of things. So it allows me to see the humanity of people and life around me, and then life situations, and that everybody is in this. Everybody is suffering in some form. Everybody is hurting in some form. Everybody is passing on their suffering and their hurt in some form, and everybody at some level is also trying to figure it out. Whether they're struggling in the subconscious of their mind, and they're trying to wake up, or they're on the search, or they found their intuition, they found the knower within themselves, and they're going through the process of recognizing the difference between what's real and unreal, what's their truth story and what's their hurt story, and just recognizing the truth of things, and then seeing it from this place. So the arc story is everybody is in this story, and everybody's on the arc of this story, and everybody has to figure out at some point fear, and how to master fear and how to deal with fear. And to do that, it's to know the true nature of it. Okay? And then equally is when we can look at hurt as an experience of our connection rather than as our separation, it makes it easier to look at our hurt. It makes it easier to do that, because we know that there's a part of us within it that we can truly grow in. It's not feeling hurt for hurt's sake. That's not the purpose of it. Is to feel the hurt so we can let it go. So then how we approach the hurt is elementally important. So having that sanctuary within us, that place within us that can facilitate that, is really, really important. It's really important. Okay, so what else can I say about that? I will say this, and again, I'm saying this for all hurts, but I'm also mindful that some hurts, it's not that we want to, get past our hurt, forget about it, it never happened, that's not the truth of it, because the truth of it is that it's part of our story. And that you want to know all of your story, and you want to remember all your story, but it's the telling of the truth of the story rather than the hurt of the story. So it's not that we forget the hurt. It's not that it never existed, because it's part of the journey. And if I said it this way, if I said it's never too late, it's never too late. And why? Is, let's say somebody has gone on a long hurt journey, is that I'll give you an example. Is each chakra has a lesson in it, and each life cycle that we live, every 7 years or so, there's different life cycles. So 1 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, 21 to 28. And each one is directly related to a chakra. So the first one is the root chakra. So we come into this life and we want to get a grounding. We want to physically feel secure in our bodies, but also in our environment, the house, the community, the people around us. Is having that physical sense of security is really important. If we don't have it, is we can be afraid, and is we can hunker down, as we can start collapsing, or we don't feel secure in it, or it can unground us, and it makes us feel like we want to escape. That there isn't that physical security. So you want to come into this life and find that place of grounding, that place of security. Yeah. But equally, your physical ground might have been a very secure place, but your emotional ground was not. So you got all your physical needs met, but your emotional needs were maybe not met. And there's an insecurity in it. There's not a solid grounding in that. So we can be collapsing on an emotional level or ungrounded because the root chakra isn't settled. We haven't learned our lesson. We haven't awoken and learned the lesson we need to learn. Same at a mental level. At a mental level, again, is coming into ourselves and finding that ground, finding that center, finding that place where this is where I am, this is where I reside, this is the ground within me, and then okay, here's how I engage with life. If we don't have that, we can be ungrounded. So how does that happen? I'll say it this way: at a certain point in life, kids experience loneliness. And I think that from my own experience, just observing my own kids, it's normally around the 5-ish mark, 5.5. Is their intellect has developed enough, they're structuring themselves enough that at one point you see them begin to experience loneliness. You can see it in them. Now what's happening is that you will have heard this. Me say this before. This room is my mind. That room is your mind. So this wall is my mind screen. So that's where all my thoughts are. Okay. And then when I'm not my thoughts because they don't last. They come and go. There's a stream of thoughts, but they're all coming and going. So I'm not my thoughts. So I can pull away from my thoughts. And as I detach from my thoughts, I come into the room itself, the mind field. And there's a fullness in it. And it can feel very, very full. It's wonderful. However, that isn't always the case. Is if I'm young, and this is normally when it happens to us, is that at some point I can intellectualize in my mind. I'm thinking in my mind. I'm forming thoughts. I'm forming structures of personality and identity. But also, there's times in my mind when my mind goes quiet. My thoughts go quiet, and there's no thoughts. And what happens is that I detach from the mind screen and I come into the mind field. But unfortunately, my awareness is not awakened yet. So I don't recognize this as a fullness. I recognize this as a void. Because when I don't have thoughts to go, there I am, when I come away from that, there's no I in it. I just feel empty. And I come into the void. And what happens is that when we're in the void, is that then people start to feel lonely. There's a loneliness that comes into it. And if we stay long enough in the loneliness, is then we go deeper into the void and we can start to move into despair. We get that sense of going down. There's a depression, literally a pressure that's pushing us down. And we can go into a loneliness, a despair, and a depression. That's like a natural state within us. It's a place we can go when we're going down that road of suffering and hurt. It can be mental, but equally you can be emotionally doing it, or physically. Again, you can be compressed, and collapsing and losing the strength of your body, even as a child. So it's coming into that place as kids learn loneliness. And then it's the levels of despair with which they go into. Is if a person doesn't figure that out, if they don't figure out that struggle, is the natural thing to do would be to grab onto something. So I'll grab onto whatever I can. So now I'll grab onto the thoughts. I'll grab onto whatever thought is there, because I'll hold on to that, because it's better to hold on to that than to have nothing, to be empty. So now the personality is getting stronger, and equally the thoughts and the emotions have to get stronger to hold on to some form of identity. And the attachments get really, really strong. And if we're attaching to things, perceptions that are going to cause more hurt or more fear, is that we really start to buy into the fear and the hurt, because there's an investment in it for us. The investment is it's something to hold on to. It's an experience of life, that it's still an experience than the emptiness itself. And the last place a person wants to be is to find themselves back in that despair. So they'll fill their life full of stuff. Do you know somebody who hates being alone? Always needs to be around people. Do you know somebody who just needs to be busy all the time? Because if they're not busy, they end up going back to that place. Is that if that lesson isn't learned, is you can have a person go through many different life cycles, many decades, is constantly avoiding that space by attaching to different things all the time. Does that make sense? And the suffering of that struggle and hurt in the root chakra can play out for a very long time. Sometimes it can even get to a place where it can go into a crisis mode. And what I mean by that is that the core ground within the person is not there. So what happens is that there's only so many attachments that we can manage at any one time, that if it overwhelms us, what happens is that our attachments start to fall down. So we lose the disconnection to the drive and the motivation to do the things we're doing in our lives. And life can start to fall in around us. Relationships can fall apart, careers can fall apart, friendships can fall apart, whatever it is can fall apart. And that it all begins to collapse in. And people have these crisis moments. Part of the arc of life is we all have crisis moments where things begin to collapse. But they're very much based on the chakras and the truth frequencies within and our relationship to them and the reality of that, or the unrealness of it within ourselves. So let's say a person goes through this crash and all falls apart, and they get up the next day, and then they're going to have, might take a few days, might take whatever mental time it'll take. I'm not trying to be facetious, but one day they'll wake up and they'll realize all these things are gone, but what's left is myself. I'm here, and that I'm present, and that the only thing I can deal with right now is right now, and that I'm going to take one day at a time, and I'm going to bring myself with me every day. So I'll only do what I can do on a day. What's happening is that the person, all the attachments are gone, for the most part, nothing to hold on to. They're into despair. They might go to the depths of despair. And when you go to the depths of despair, there's a primal energy in the depths of all experiences. Some people call it Kundalini energy. It's the primal energy in life and reality. And basically, a way to describe it is it's called the phoenix from the flames. So when everything turns to ashes and everything gets stripped away, is what happens is that the spirit, the reality of the person, the being of the person surges up like a phoenix from the flames, comes roaring up. And what happens is that the person begins to realize that this void is not empty, it's actually full. So what they realize is that they are not their thoughts, and that attachments they have, that's not who they are. Is that when they come into this mind field and recognize the awareness, the consciousness within it, they realize that this is my true nature, this is my true self, and I am now present. and I am now awakened. And the phoenix from the flames arises, and it lights up the mindfulness of the space. And then the person begins to build a new life around that being of connection, around that ground. And they'll only build a life on the ground that they can stand on, whether it's physical, energetic, emotional, mental, into the rooms, the people, in the situation. They'll only step on ground that is real ground for them, that's true for them. So the things that they commit to are things that come from their innate being, not just of the doing. That must feel right for them. And that rightness is them attuning again to their intuitive sense of their self and the knowing within it. And they've awoken here, but they've also awoken the root chakra. And they've really come into the moment. And it doesn't have to come through crisis. It doesn't have to come through hurt. But more often than not, there needs to be a certain amount of suffering and hurt to encourage the person to figure it out. It may happen one or two chakras where it comes through the hurt story, and then a person can get to a point where they realize, I don't have to hurt anymore to awaken and to really grow. It doesn't have to hurt anymore. It really doesn't, because I've learned how to grow through my fear. I've learned how to grow through my hurt. Now all I need to do is now just grow my connection. I'll follow the connection, and I'm following the intuitiveness of that. I'm following the rightness of it. And then I can see the boundaries. My fear is telling me where my ground is and where it isn't. And I'll only move in that. I don't need to go over over the edges to learn the lesson. I just don't need to do that, because my ground is so big that I can be much more adaptable in this ground than taking risks on going to a ground that's not secure or not clear. Does that make sense? And again, it's attuning to one's inner sense of knowing within oneself and learning the lessons that need to be learned. So fear and hurt are intrinsically part of the story, and it's never too late. And let me add on one more thing to it's never too late. All the energy, all the effort, everything that a person puts into their life and some part of their life. And I'll give you an example. A person goes through a crisis. Everything falls apart, and it's like, oh my God, all that effort, all that energy, all that life, all those things, in one way you could say they're gone. You could say, oh, wasted. It's not wasted, but it can seem like that at times. But the lesson that's learned is learned so profoundly. And the value of that lesson is learned so profoundly that at one point the person can get to a level in themselves where they go, I wish it didn't happen that way, but it was going to happen some way, and it did happen that way. So I accept it happened that way. And in fact, I wouldn't want it to happen any other way, because the way it happened brought me to this learning. And if that's the way it happened, honor it. I can honor that. I can honor that story. I can honor that journey. And part of it is owning it. Owning the hurt, owning the fear, owning our actions, and knowing what our story is in that. And then the question is that, would you want to change that? No. What do I mean by that? Is imagine you're at a funeral, You're at a funeral, and there's 3 or 4 people around the coffin remembering. I can't give a name because it'll be somebody that'll be there, somebody knows name, but some person is passed, and you're standing there, and 3 or 4 people standing around, and you're remembering, which is always the same. We're remembering the person, and it's always important to remember all of the person. You can't just remember the good bits. Everybody's had a life of highs and lows, goods and bads. You want to remember it all. But imagine you tried to take a bit of that person's life away and say, well, no, we won't remember that part. That part wasn't very nice. So what we do is we throw that out. We won't remember it. You'd never do it. You'd never do it. Imagine doing that to somebody's life when they've passed. That you go, oh, no, we just, that part's not worth remembering. We wouldn't do it. And we shouldn't do it. And equally, we shouldn't do it to ourselves. So it's really important to remember our story and know our story and know the truth of it and then honor it. And then there's our humanity in it, is allowing yourself to see your own humanity, and then also to see the humanity in everybody else. And again, that's part of just seeing the truth of the way things are. Okay? So it's very interesting. As part of the wisdom of the third eye is having that clarity of understanding. So now we're going to do a bit of practice. Let me just check the time. As I taught, it's 7:10. Time always just flies with me. I forget how much time has gone by. So now we're going to do a bit of practice. What I want you to do is get comfortable. I want you to sit nice and straight and get nice and comfortable in yourself so that your pelvis is supported, nice and stable. Your legs and arms are rested, that you can sit tall in your spine and that you can breathe easy. Okay, so make it all comfortable. If you're going to be sitting now for about 20 minutes, is make sure that if you need any support, is give yourself the support now. Don't wait until your leg's dead or your back's tired. Is give yourself the support now. And then what I want you to do is just close your eyes and then just take a couple of moments just to scan your body. And I'll touch off some of the practices we've already done because it's building on those, yeah? So get a sense of where you are in the room. A sense of where your body is in the room. Get a sense of where other objects are in the room. There's the sense of the room itself. Then there's the sense of the building you're in and outside the building. And then if you hear a couple of sounds, remember we did this practice, is listen to the sound, get a sense of the distance between you and the sound, and then the space in between. And you're just opening up your spatial awareness. And as you do that externally, I want you to begin to do it internally. So from your mind's eye, think about when you close your eyes and you turn your awareness inwards, is you get a sense of perception between your eyebrows. It's like your mind screen. It's where you look. It's like you get a sense of your consciousness looking into your mind. So from your mind's eye, third eye, is you're also observing your body. Using your senses, you're watching, you're listening, you're feeling, you're just sensing. Same internally and externally, do both. And remember, you're just observing. There's no judgments, desires, or expectations. You don't need to like it or dislike it. You don't need to want it or unwant it. Or you don't need something from it, or you don't need to give it anything. You're just free in the experience. Just let whatever comes to you come to you. And that you're observing the sensations in your body. And some will be obvious, some a little bit more subtle, and then some will be in the background, or a little bit more subtle again. And again, pick one of those sensations, and then get a sense of the distance between your mind's eye and that sensation in your body. And remember, whatever you think it is, that's what it is. You're using your intuition, and then getting a sense of the space in between. Okay. And while you're doing the sounds outside, you're doing the sensations inside. And now let's do it through space and time. Is notice in your mind, You may be aware of certain rooms in your life, certain people in your life, certain situations, like your responsibilities, certain things that you're aware of. You're at the back of your mind, you could be thinking about somebody you're looking after, or something you need to do for work, or a conversation you had with a relative, or a conversation you had with your neighbor. But they all happened in rooms with particular people in particular situations and certain days and times. So there's that spatial awareness of time and space. So now you can bring them into the practice too. So you may be thinking of conversation you had with somebody last Friday. If you are, great. Get a sense of, from your mind's eye, a sense of distance between you and that conversation. Whatever you think it is, that's what it is. And then the space in between. So you're just opening up your spatial awareness of your physical environment around you, then your physical and energetic environment within you. And then in your mind, your memory, in your spatial memory is in space and time. And notice how your sense of spaciousness expands. It expands in the environment here. It expands inwardly in the beautiful and huge inner environment. And equally, it can expand in space and time. So now, how big can that space be? A simple example. I want you to think about a memory from when you were 5 years of age, and anywhere around that. Whatever memory comes to mind, that's what it is. I just want you to think of one that's a long while ago, unless you're 10 years of age right now. So a memory of when you were five years or so. And again, you don't have to have the full memory, you just even have just a sense of it. And what I want you to do is get a sense of your mind's eye now, and then the distance all the way back to that memory, and then the space in between. The space in between. Okay? And you're just getting a sense of that space and time experience, yeah? Now, as we move into the intermediate and advanced course we'll get into the psychic part of it. But for now, it's just space and time. So now what I want you to do is bring your awareness all back to here and now. And then in the here and now, I want you to just breathe slow and deep. A little bit to your navel, your rib cage, and your upper chest. Just a little bit to your navel, a little bit to your rib cage, a little bit to your upper chest. So feel all three areas expand a little bit and contract a little bit. And then what I want you to do is gently begin to sway on your sit bones. So you're sitting on the sit bones and you make a little circle. You're basically rolling a little bit around the sit bones, and not a big motion, just a small one. And what I want you to do is just let yourself feel your body press through your sit bones, and then roll your weight around the sit bones. And then notice how that creates a pressure and release in the trunk of your body. You feel the tone, and then you feel the release. And you're just centering yourself, and then I want you to sway around your center of gravity. So there's a nice sense of pressure and then release. And then I want you to begin to breathe at the same pace as you're swaying. So you're inhaling and you're exhaling. And as you sway like a pendulum from one sit bone to the next, allow yourself to breathe, inhaling and exhaling like a pendulum. And notice how you can expand the rib cage a little bit more. It'll float up slightly. It'll let you lengthen the spine up through the top of your skull. So you just let the spine get a little longer, simply because you're breathing a little slower, a little deeper. You're moving into your internal body, your inner space, moving into the energetics. So you don't just feel physical sensations, you begin to feel the flow of sensations. You get the energy just to inwardly flow. And as you do, I want you to begin to relax into the pauses at the end of your exhale. So as you exhale, find that moment to pause. And then as you inhale, there's a moment to pause. And I want you to breathe, exhaling, a moment to pause. Inhaling, a moment to pause. And notice how it settles you in the physical sway in your body. It brings a bit more of a calmness to it. It's like you're still flowing in it, but you find that there's more of a grounding in it. You're grounding yourself physically, you're grounding yourself energetically. And at one point, see if you can begin to notice that your thoughts begin to move at the same pace as your breath. And your thoughts are moving at the same pace as your body. And it's very soothing. It's very soothing in the muscles. It's like a massage. Energetically, you get that nice flow of sensations and energy. It's very soothing energetically. And mentally, it's very soothing because you're not changing your thoughts. What you're doing is you're just slowing the pace of them down. Now, as you do that, allow that sense of spatial awareness, that you're experiencing, allow that beautiful big space to be there too. So you find yourself just coming into that lovely clarity of the ease of listening, the ease of watching, the ease of feeling, and it feels really nice. And then it's in a big, big space. You just feel this spaciousness in it. And what I want you to do is recognize that in the listener, there's a consciousness. There's a presence within it. Same as you watch, as you feel, it's the same presence. You just get that sense of presence within yourself. And allow that presence to come to the fore. Let it come to the fore. Just be aware of your own sense of presence. And then allow that presence to fill the space. Just that sense of spaciousness. Your mind is open and your presence, a consciousness within you is just filling the space. And your mind is becoming mindful. And you're coming into a beautiful spaciousness and lightness within your mind. But equally, energetically and physically, you're coming into that same beautiful connection. It's like a massage, very calming. And it's a sanctuary. It's a beautiful sanctuary. And think about it, rather than viewing the mind field as a void, it's a fullness and it's full of consciousness, full of awareness. And it's our sanctuary. It's the place where we come to rest. Now, how big a sanctuary is it? And let me describe it this way to you. Think about all the physical sensations you've ever had in your body. And that all of your body is here today. Every memory is in your body today. Every experience you've ever had in your life is here right now. And imagine that you held a space in your body, that your body was able to feel everything that it needed to feel in the way that it needed to feel it, that you hold that space for your body, that it feels whatever it needs to, so not what it wants, what it needs. And really importantly, you're allowing yourself to feel it in the way that it needs to feel it. So if your body's anxious, then it needs to feel that. If your body's afraid, it needs to feel that. If your body is hurt, it needs to feel that too. But in all those experiences, you're holding open the connection. You're holding open the pathway back for your body to come into oneness, to integrate itself, and to enjoy the beautiful effects of the oneness of being in the body. And it's like a massage. So that lovely sway in your body eases our anxiety, eases our fears, and eases our pain. And it allows us to feel a connection. The more you do it, your body will tell you its story. And that you're listening to the story from a place of silence and being within yourself. Watching your story from a place of clearness. Feeling your story from a place of feeling. You're doing it consciously. You know that you're doing it. You know that you know. And what you're doing is you're giving it all of your attention. Whatever your body needs, one of the things it needs is your focus, your attention. And then you're going to give it your energy. You're going to give it the space to express itself fully, so that you will not understand something until you fully experience it. If you fight it along the way and try to change it, I'm going to judge it to change it. No, I expect it to do this, so you want it to do something else, and then I desire it to do something else. When you start to put that type of control on it, then you're never allowing yourself to fully hear the story. So now you are now holding the space open so that you can fully understand the story with awareness and with a little bit of care. You care to do it. And that you're just letting yourself feel your body. And you're letting your body feel itself, and then the full range of its experience. And none of it is wrong. None of your body is excluded. And there are no, what do we say about the fear? There are no enemies. The fear is not our enemy. You know? So what's your fear really telling you? Your hurt is not the enemy. Your hurt is telling you something. What is your hurt telling you? And really, it's your own inner voice speaking to you from a place of fear, and your own inner voice speaking to you from a place of hurt. And if you can be big enough to put the fear down, and you can be big enough to put the hurt down, all that's left is the truth of your inner voice. And your inner voice is calling itself back to that connection. That's what it's doing. So now you're holding the space open. You don't need to go searching. Is you let that come to you. You let it come to you. You don't need to go searching. You just hold the space open. You hold the sanctuary open. You listen, you watch, you feel, and whatever comes to you is receive it. Just hear it. Just watch it and just feel it. Equally, on an emotional level, that you're going to allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you need to feel in the way that you need to feel it. On an emotional level, that you're going to let yourself feel whatever it is you're truly feeling. And then you're going to let yourself feel it in the way that you truly need to feel it. So if you're sad, you're sad. If you're happy, you're happy. It's not always about the struggles of our sadness. Sometimes we struggle to let the joy out. You know? So sometimes we're not, it's not always about freeing the hurt in ourselves, it's about freeing the joy as well. So it's a myriad of our human experience. But you're holding the space open to let yourself feel whatever it is you need to feel in the way you need to feel it. And then in your mind, you're holding your mind open with awareness, watching, listening, feeling. The intention is to understand, not to change, not to reshape, not to make wrong, not to put expectations or desires on it. It is what it is. Let it be. And that your mind has all the space that it needs to let itself think about whatever it is it needs to think about in the way that it needs to think about it. Is that give your mind the space to figure out its own thoughts. Because the body is always moving towards balance. It just is. Every system and function of the body is moving towards balance. The more we get out of our own way, the more we'll understand the truth and wisdom that our body holds. The same with the energetic body, always moving towards balance. And the more we can stop the fight and the struggle, the more we can not take the hurt so personal, is we're getting out of our own way so we can experience the truth of it. And slowly, slowly, we're less anxious. We're less afraid. We're less suffering. There's less hurt. There's more connection. And then there's more authenticity. So there's more joy. There's more calmness. There's more peace. There's more contentment. There might be more motivation, more vitality, more understanding, more patience. Equally, because it's the broad range of our humanity. It's not all about what we classify as the positive stuff. There might be a little bit more authentic sadness or authentic embarrassment, shyness. Like there's a part of me that is inherently shy, bashful. You might see me sometimes being a bit bashful. It's part of my nature. It's very authentic. Doesn't matter how old I am or my life experience, this bashfulness just comes in at times. So it's all the full range, and it's the authenticity within that. There are times when we will be anxious, but we're authentically in it. We're not struggling in it. There are times when we will be authentically afraid, and we can hear that, and we can engage with that and work from there if that's how or where we truly are. But we're not fighting with it. It's not the enemy. There are times when we will be and are authentically hurt. This hurts, like the hurt in a heart. This hurts. And we're in the hurt of it, and that's the truth of it, and you're authentically in it. And it feels wonderful because it's authentic. And does it still hurt? Yes. But does it feel alive? It does. I feel whole in this. I don't feel less. I feel more because of it. It's beautiful. So that we're holding this sanctuary within ourselves. And that slowly is you'll find that the body works its way back to wholeness. It's a bit like the body's out of alignment. There's lots of different compartments. All the compartments slowly work their way back. They don't all rush back at once, and you wouldn't want it. It's too shocking, too much. So you gradually, it's like turning a big ship. Slowly the ship turns, but you're moving a lot, but you're moving it incrementally. So slowly the body comes into its oneness. Energetically, emotionally, slowly, you come into your emotional, natural state. Letting go of the emotional part of it, the struggling part of it. Slowly. Same with the mind. Slowly we let go of the struggles and the sufferings. It doesn't all happen at once. Slowly you find yourself being more grounded in all the rooms of your life. You find more vibrancy with the people in your life. You find your personal power in the situations of your life. Slowly it begins to permeate in. And then after a while, you start to see the wave motion of your consciousness of being begin to permeate more and more through your life. It's the spatial awareness. You'll physically feel it, energetically, mentally. You'll see it in the environment around you. You'll see it with the people in the situations. You'll even be able to go back through space and time and experience a memory, a time in your life where it was a hurt story, and that you will now view it differently. You will view it as a truth story. You see the truth of it. You will not forget the hurt. The hurt is part of your story, but that's not you. You are the truth in that. And you're just reclaiming your authenticity in it. And that you will feel that spaciousness within yourself. You'll feel the journey of your life, and you'll feel the spaciousness of it. And you'll be connected to it. And it's beautiful. And you're understanding your own story of where you came from, where you are now, and the purpose and the meaning of where you're going to. It's beautiful. But for now, let's just spend a couple of moments where you're just letting yourself settle into holding your space, holding your sanctuary open, and just allowing yourself to be with yourself. Nothing more, nothing less. And nice and gently. Just take a nice big breath in, nice slow breath in, and then open your eyes. So, well done. Long session, big session. A couple things to take away from it is fear is not the enemy, it's best friend. Your hurt is part of your connection story. And that as you hold your space open, is you're holding it open for all of yourself. None of yourself is being excluded from it. But then all of yourself can come into that beautiful space in its own time. And that you'll find that the natural ebb and flow, like this sway, the natural sway of that spontaneous engagement within yourself, you'll find that all your thoughts start to move in that natural sway. And they'll have their times when they come in and they'll tell you a bit of your story, and then they'll sway off again. And then another story will come in, a little bit of your story, a little bit of the truth, the wisdom, and then it'll sway off again. So we'll explore that next week. Is how to activate insight, how to activate intuition, is how to engage with ourselves, and being able to, at a certain point, you can call things in. So when you want to use your intuition in an active way, is you can call an insight in, you can call the wisdom of it in, and you can hold that intention and then observe how the universe starts to deliver that story to you. So we'll tease that out as we go along. I know I didn't go into the heart and the other chakras. I will get there. But for now is a super session. Thank you very much.